The original Splatoon released back in 2015, over 7 years ago at this point. For a brand new IP, it did amazingly well. Splatoon 3 only released like 4 months ago at this point, and it's already one of Nintendo's best-selling games ever. I don't really think it's an exaggeration to say that Splatoon has become one of Nintendo's most important franchises. Like in Nintendo's eyes, it's probably up there with the likes of Mario and Zelda in terms of importance of making money. It's really impressive considering that this thing released on like a door stopper, and the TV trailer they had for it. I have to say, I'm really thankful that this game didn't come out in the 90s. The original Splatoon commercial might be mocked nowadays, but it would have been way worse back then. Like back in the 90s, gaming magazines were like super horny. And with Splatoon and the whole inking thing, I think advertisers would have just gone wild. Look at this one from Nintendo for the Game Boy. Seriously distracting, yeah? Well, I don't really blame him. What is this weak setup here? Where's the ball gag? Where's the whip? Cause this shit's making me softer than ice cream. My family watches my videos, by the way. I'm sure whenever my grandparents view one, they always pray for me, hoping that I don't go to hell. Anyway, the first Splatoon released with great success, but there was one major flaw, in being that Nintendo forgot to program the entirety of Salmon Run into the game. To fix this massive blunder, Nintendo released Splatoon 2, which included this mode. Unfortunately, one of the employees died from a stroke and collapsed on the keyboard, causing the game to only allow access on certain days. That's really fucked up if you think about it. Like, you buy a game and when you boot it up, the game tells you no. Imagine buying a house, but you can only access certain rooms on certain days of the week. After finally getting their act together, Nintendo made Salmon Run available 24/7 in Splatoon 3. Thanks to this, I can now force my Octoling to work an unreasonable amount of overtime for my own enjoyment. When looking at the surface, Salmon Run is basically kind of a horde mode, which you've seen in many other games, where you have to fight against hundreds of enemies, all while your teammates and you try to survive. There's plenty of bosses here that have their own attacks and unique ways to take them down, different special ways, different water tides, and so on. You're not really trying to like defend a base or anything. In fact, you're not really defending anything at all, aside from your teammates. Your goal is to get a certain amount of salmon eggs into a basket in a specific set time. What it means is that rather than trying to play defense to keep the enemies out, you instead have to play really offensively. You have to go up to the bosses and kill them. You can't avoid them, otherwise you don't get the salmon eggs. So you have to engage with them. But since there's nothing to defend, this also means that the enemies are also playing very offensively. They're going after you and your teammates and nothing else. This kind of setup makes it where you're always having to move around and do something, whether it be collecting eggs, killing bosses, reviving teammates, or just straight up surviving. The game forces you to interact with danger constantly, which makes it such a thrilling and fun mode. The whole thing's a balancing act of trying to take out the boss's enemies so you don't get overwhelmed, but also take the time to get the eggs transported to the basket. It's all about management and when to shift your priorities. It's also about cooperation. Don't let the people in freelance fool you. You're supposed to be working as a team. You have to watch each other's backs and prepare to revive a teammate when they're down by shooting them with your gun or throwing a bomb at them. It's really cool. One way the game forces people to work together is by having weapons randomly assigned to each of the players every wave, and every couple days the weapons will change so things don't get too stale. Each weapon provided usually excels in a specific area. Now, I'm not going to make an in-depth documentary about them all. I'm not even going to go every weapon type. If you're looking for something like that, I suggest looking at other channels like Pro Chara or Splat Channel. HD Hamzy, the guy with the Moogle profile picture. Not to be confused with this Moogle YouTuber, that is a completely different person. The weapons provided are the ones that are generally used in regular turf war, but now being used in a different context. Take the rollers, for example. In turf war ranks, you'll find many players flicking these things because it's pretty good at taking out opponents from a distance. But in Salmon Run, you'll actually want to use the rolling feature more since they're excellent at taking out hordes of lesser salmonids, especially the Dynamo Roller, which can easily take out Quahawks. The flicking with it isn't really ideal. You could probably do it if you're in a safe enough spot, but you're better off just taking care of the salmonids, especially with the dynamo and how long flicking it'd take. Between startup and the time it takes to finish the attack, you would have enough time to like scratch your ass or something. The carbon roller is the weakest version of the rollers in terms of attack power. Can't even roll over like regular chum, but attacking is really quick, so you can just make like Bob Ross and beat the devil out of them. Chargers are another great weapon for Salmon Run, as they can delete any boss from the game with just like 1 or 2 attacks. The E-Leader takes a while to charge, but it can pretty much one-shot almost any boss. The mid variant can still do decent damage and charges faster, but it'll take a couple of shots for some of the larger enemies and bosses. And then you have the weak one here, which has has a severe case of erectile dysfunction. This one sucks. I hate using this one. The whole thing that makes the charger useful is that they could take out bosses quickly and efficiently, but this can't even really do that. Not only that, but it can't pierce, so it's not really good at taking out the lesser salmonids either. The only thing it might be good at is reviving teammates, since you can use it at a distance, but you could just use your bomb to do that. Sure, it takes more ink, but, you know, it's a bomb, meaning it's much more likely to actually hit your target. It just sucks. You got the umbrella ones, which are pretty good at protecting yourself, and in terms of the very large one, even other teammates, so they can attack without worrying about getting splatted. I like this one where it keeps firing even after the umbrella is open, so I can protect myself and attack at the same time. And during glowflies, it makes a good replacement for the rollers. The bucket weapons are really interesting. They probably change up your playstyle the most between them. The bubbler is just really great in general since it covers a large distance and can shred through bosses. The tri one covers a lot of ground, it tears through the lesser salmonids. And then you got this one, which I didn't write the name down for some reason. You'll see it on screen right now. You gotta angle it up slightly, but if you do it correctly, you can just evaporate the salmonids. It's crazy. Alright, I think you get the point. There are more weapons, but I don't want this to become a makeshift guide to Salmon Run. I just wanted to point out how different the weapons are and how they ask for a specific playstyle. This is a team-based mode, so if you have something like a charger, you need to focus on what makes the charger unique to best help your teammates. The same way they should use their weapons to help you. I also mentioned in the beginning that weapons are randomized. You can't select which one you want. This is because the game's unpredictable. Bosses spawning everywhere, like different types to mess with you. You can't use just one type of strategy within a wave. Things are constantly changing and you have to react to that. The random weapons just help emphasize this. It also just makes it like more interesting and fun. I've mentioned the lesser salmonids before, but I probably should like go in a little depth of what these things are. They're the basic enemy of the game and they come in 3 sizes. You got the regular chum, the small fry, and the cohawks. Cohawks can be really annoying since they have a decent amount of health. So if you get cornered by them, you're pretty much fucked. Small fry don't seem like they'd be that big of an issue, but since they're so tiny, they can get lost in a crowd quite easily and take you by surprise. And of course, you have the average chum. These guys aren't too bad unless you have a weapon that doesn't really handle hordes all that well. Despite being simple enemies, these guys are probably what you'll be splatted by the most. Very often, the map can be overrun by these guys and you get surrounded by them with no real escape. Not only that, but their hits have some pretty severe knockback, so in many cases, you get bounced around like a ping pong ball with ADHD or getting pushed right into the water. The knockback can be used to your benefit, like pushing yourself away from the horde, which is pretty cool, but for the most part, it just like means death. Finally, you have these special flying chums here. These guys will fly over to a group of eggs and pick them up if you don't get to them in time. And they can pick up quite a lot of eggs. Like I've seen one pick up like 10 eggs before. It's pretty crazy. This seems like it'd be like a massive issue, but in all honesty, these guys never are really a problem. Most of the time, if they are picking up a bunch of eggs, there are ones you are already not going after, like ones by the shore. If anything, these guys can actually be pretty helpful because sometimes they'll fly right over the basket. So if they got like a group of 10 eggs that are flying towards you, you can shoot them down and you got a bunch of free eggs basically. It's pretty cool. A very important part of Salmon Run is teamwork, and communication of course is a very big aspect of teamwork. Now of course if you're playing with friends, this part is easy. You can just talk to each other. I played plenty of rounds with my sister and it's really great to actually be able to communicate about like what we're doing and where we are, even though she likes to go to the shore a lot and die immediately. But in freelance this is much more difficult. The game still does have ways for you to be aware of what your teammates are doing though. Like the most obvious example is the in-game prompts here. You got this way and booyah. Now, I like booyahing as much as the next guy, but I can't help but feel this is a little lacking. I suppose it works if you need to quickly get your teammates' attention of like a threat or something, then it's fine, or just need to know your position. It even shows arrows on someone else's screen to directly tell you where it's coming from. So it's definitely useful, but I feel like they could be like a little more specific. Like why not an eggs this way or boss this way or something like that. Maybe even like a lookout prompt, since sometimes it's hard for a teammate to see what's coming behind them. I think I would get a lot of mileage out of that one. You can also cry for help when you get splatted. Not only that, but you can also see fallen teammates anywhere on the map. So if you are splatted, you should be easy to find. If teammates aren't coming for you, that probably means they're in a situation where they can't, or they're too busy jerking off to notice. It's really important to pay attention to teammates because if one of y'all is down, the rest of you will start dropping like flies. It's not easy to recover. Specials though are a great way of reviving downed allies, as well as a bunch of other stuff. There's different types of specials, and like the weapons, each of them have their own strength. The Booyah Bomb is the best one. It's just a giant explosion that kills everything and revives all your teammates teammates. Triple ink strike is similar in that you cause massive explosions that take out bosses and revive opponents. It's not as good as the Booyah Bomb, but it's still one of the more useful specials. Then you have Killer Whale 5.1. People say that the special sucks, but that's not true actually. The ink vac is the one that sucks. I think people are just confused. The Killer Whale can lock onto at least 3 targets and kills pretty much anything with relative ease. I find it great if there's multiple problematic bosses on shore that's too risky to approach. You also have the Wave Breaker. This is mostly used for clearing out lesser salmonids in the area if you're getting too overwhelmed. It's also fantastic at reviving opponents since it spills out waves 3 times, so there's plenty of opportunities for it to hit someone. Reef Sighter I find to be great for getting the hell out of dodge. If you get cornered, then it's a pretty great getaway option. It's also great for reaching a fallen ally quickly to revive them. You can also take some of the bosses that stay closer to the ground out. Ink Check is pretty alright. You can fly in the air, so there's not a lot of things that can get you, so you can quickly clear out some bosses from a pretty safe distance. And then you have the Crab Tank. This one blows. I find it to be the least useful. When you're firing, you're still completely vulnerable and can be taken out very easily. And in the more defensive ball form, you can't attack. I pretty much use it just to take out the fly fuckers exclusively, since it can shoot off explosions that destroy the baskets instantly. Anyway, these specials are here to help you and your teammates get out of a pretty bad jam. Like if almost all of them are down and they need a quick reviving, or if there's too many bosses and enemies that need clearing out, or even to just get in a better position. While I do generally like to hold on to my specials till the final wave like my life depends on it, you should really use them just whenever they're useful, regardless of whatever wave you're on. And especially not when the wave is already over. Really? We were just fighting for our fucking lives like 30 seconds ago and you find it appropriate to bust that thing out now? You piece of shit. I'm sorry, that was completely uncalled for. Things have been really stressful for me for these past couple of weeks. Kidney stones and all that. Another cool thing about specials is that if you manage to throw one out before you get splatted, the game will delay until the special is finished, as it can still potentially revive a teammate. The same rings true for the Splat Bomb, which is also a great teammate reviver. I suppose it's time to talk about the bosses. These guys are your main target since defeating them gives you golden eggs. There's about like 11 different bosses or so, I didn't actually count now I think about it, and they all work differently and interact with each other in unique ways. Take the Steelhead for example. If you blow up the Vomit Bomb on its head, it'll explode as bombs tend to do, killing anything around it, including other bosses. Steelheads can be real prices though, what the hell? They're completely invincible and can only be killed when the bomb is out, and the hit detection is a real fuck, so trying to kill this thing can be a real pain in the ass. Salmonids are another boss that can interact with other salmonids by, well, slamming them. They put down a barrier that protects anything under it, but if you pass through it, they'll try to crush you, killing anything underneath it, including bosses. These guys aren't too bad, they're more of a nuisance than a major threat. They spawn some salmon from the top, adding to the horde, causing more problems for you and your team. Drizzlers send out these rain clouds forward that can be difficult to maneuver around. Not only that, but they have a lot of health. Not many weapons are going to be able to take them out in one cycle. Thankfully, the bolt they shoot out lingers for a little bit, and you can shoot it right back at them at the right angle, killing them instantly. And even some other enemies. Scrappers. Out of all the bosses, these ones are probably the least problematic. They can only attack you by running into you. They can be stopped in their tracks with just one shot. Hell, one might say that this boss appearing is more of a positive than a negative, since you can easily lure it to the basket for free eggs. The only time this guy becomes an issue is if there's like more than one of them, and also if there's a bunch of other shit going on. They can take you off guard and spot you from behind. Steel eels are like scrappers, except much more problematic. For one, they're really long and constantly covering the ground in sludge. When there's multiple of this guys, it can be kind of hard to hit anything since they're like a moving wall. They can also trap you in a bad spot that gets you splatted. You have to take out the salmonid at the end of the tail, which can be hard when they like to overlap with themselves. Moths are very similar to scrappers in that they're pretty easy to take out. You just gotta chuck a bomb in its mouth when it pops up. They aren't too big of a threat, but they can still catch you by surprise if you're in a bad position and you can't really maneuver out of the way. They're also more likely to do this as they can travel anywhere, up walls, underwater. They can even reach you on the top of the fish stick. Speaking of the fish stick, they can be really annoying. They can't really attack you unless you get caught under their stick as they put it down, and they cover the ground with like their toxic sludge. What is that stuff supposed to be anyway? Is it some kind of defensive measure? In the story mode, you have a little small fly friend, and he doesn't leave a trail of that stuff, so they must be doing it voluntarily. It's odd because it seems like it's designed specifically to mess with inklings and octolings. So have these two species been fighting for so long that salmonids evolved to spew out this sludge to fight against the inklings? I don't know, I'm not a theorist. Why am I even focusing on this shit? Flipper floppers send out a ring and you gotta fill it with your ink so it rams its face in, basically killing itself. Not too problematic, but he can be difficult to handle if you got a weapon that doesn't really cover a lot of ground quickly, like a slow charger or something. Big shots can be pretty obnoxious. He sends out metal balls towards the center of the stage, creating shockwaves you have to dodge. It's not too bad when there's only one of them. them, but when 2, 3, even 4 get thrown into the mix, it's basically impossible to avoid. I'm also pretty sure they have like the most amount of health out of any of the bosses. These are durable bastards. On the bright side, you can actually use their cannon to shoot eggs towards the basket, which is infinitely useful. Jeff Bezos is another difficult boss to put up with, but if you manage to unionize with the other coworkers, he should go down pretty easily. Stingers. They shoot out a massive stream of what I presume is vomit. It can go through any object and aim anywhere on the map. He also likes to stay by the shore, so if you want to take him out, you actually have to go to him. Last and least, the flyfish. These guys are the banes of many people's existence, and it's easy to see why. They stay by the shore, they can't be attacked by regular means, you have to use your bombs to take out the baskets, which take up a lot of ink. They can attack you from anywhere on the map. They're just kind of a bitch. To be honest, their attacks aren't too bad to dodge. It's just that they act as a constant threat and they're hard to deal with. Those are all the bosses. Individually, they don't seem that bad, but when the stage starts to get filled with them, it can be difficult to maneuver around and sort your priorities. You really have to trust your teammates and be able to help at any moment. The stages can also play a factor in how you approach situations and bosses. As of now, there's only 3 stages. The 3 stages right now that are available are Gone Fishing Hydroplant, Spawning Grounds, and Sockeye Station. Spawning Ground as of now is the only returning stage from Splatoon 2. I think it was chosen specifically because it emphasizes the egg throw mechanic really well. If you're down by the beach, you gotta throw the eggs up this wall. Over here on the grates, you would have to slowly walk over to the basket in Splatoon 2, but now you can just pass it forward for someone else. Down here by the docks, you can throw them forward rather than hopping up these steps. I really like it. The only spot I don't like is kind of this corner here under the grates. It's really awkward down here. There's nothing really to throw the eggs, and bosses in general just don't spawn in this section. It almost seems entirely pointless. It's mostly just here just so if you go through the grates, you don't immediately fall to your death. Sockeye Station has this tower here in the center that's great for ranged weapons, being able to snipe bosses from a safe position. You can also pass eggs up there, so while they're safe from danger, they can also get eggs in the basket if you pass it along to them. It's also great since they can easily revive pretty much anyone around here by chucking a bomb if you get splatted. You also have this corner section over here, which is a little difficult to maneuver in, especially if it gets cluttered with bosses, since there's not a whole lot of places you can go. Gone Fishing Hydroplant is my personal favorite. It's probably the map that emphasizes the egg throw the most, since the outer walls can't be inked, so you have to throw the eggs to the upper corner from the shore so your teammates can get them into the basket. On low tides, this stage is a breeze, since this section around the basket is a square. Bosses get cluttered while you're in the safer position on higher ground and can pick them off, leaving eggs near the basket to reach the quota with ease. They're all great. They do a good job bringing light to the new egg throw while feeling unique and different from one another. And aesthetic-wise, they're all great too. The entirety of Salmon Run's mood is great. It's all green and orange, which gives you a feeling as one of those jobs you'd see on like Dirty Jobs or something like that. Like when the person is working in the sewers and they have to walk around in all the gross water filled with piss and shit and cum and vomit and spit and snot and mucus and blood and earwax and hairs and used tissue paper and diarrhea and broccoli. It reminds me of that. I also really like the outfits that the cephalopods wear. I have no idea what most of this shit is for. It's clearly not to protect us from the sludge, since we get splatted just by getting hit by a spoon from a small fry, but they look cool. I also really love the music. It's different from the rest of the game. Turf War sounds like... Meanwhile, Salmon Run sounds like... I love it. It's so dingy and really sounds like the music equivalent of working in an old rundown warehouse where half the equipment doesn't work and just sits off to the side, kind of being in the way. You also have this little training area, so while you wait, you can practice, unlike in Splatoon 2 where you just stare at a menu, waiting, and waiting, and waiting. Ah, shit. The water level is also important in how you'll be able to handle the bosses. You got mid-tide, high tide, and low tide. Mid-tide is generally the default. You have the shores far out, and then of course you got the center. It's large enough so that it doesn't get too cramped, but it's still pretty easy to get separated, which means if you're splatted away from everyone else, you're just not gonna get revived anytime soon. Or even worse, if you're the only survivor when everyone else is on the other side of the map. High tide can be pretty difficult since there's not a lot of places to run to or escape, and the amount of bosses that spawn do not go down. It's the same as mid or low tide. The silver lining to this is that the bosses are almost always near the basket. This includes bosses that are usually only by the shore, so reaching the egg quota should be quite easy. It's just the surviving that's the hard part. Then at low tide you have to travel far off to another part of the map, which is usually very flat with little obstacles, and more about transporting eggs from a considerable distance, since salmonids tend to spawn on the opposite end, far away from the basket. Each of these levels emphasize a different aspect of teamwork. High tide is about watching each other's backs and taking out as many bosses as possible, so your team doesn't get completely overwhelmed. Low tide emphasizes the egg throwing and working together to chain the eggs and be able to get them to the basket. Mid tide is a mixture of these play styles, making sure you don't get too overwhelmed, but passing eggs along if it's a far enough distance so you can meet the quota. Water levels can also be a sign of what special wave is coming along next. Special waves happen when the sun lowers, well, less lower and more phase out of the sky. Special waves can range from piss easy or extremely hard. These waves, like the rest of the mode, heavily emphasizes teamwork in their own unique ways. Glowflies are a perfect example of really emphasizing teamwork and also being like really freaking hard. One random player will be swarmed by glowflies, and when that happens, all the ravenous chum will chase you and you exclusively. You can't outrun them either, so you have to avoid them by more creative means. Whether it be you and your team taking them out before they can completely rush you down, you maneuvering around places so they can't get to you, hugging a wall, anything really. The thing that makes this hard is because your team is very heavily focused on just not dying, which means it can be hard to find the time to collect the golden eggs and put them in the basket. Half of my losses on glowflies were due to just not meeting the quota. Another reason why it's so hard is because the glowflies can change targets at any time. So if you're splatting the chum and suddenly the glowflies surround you, let's hope that you're prepared or not in a bad spot, because now they're all coming for your ass. It's really hard to find a nice balance between attacking these guys and taking the time to put the eggs in the basket. Most victories I've had were very close. On the opposite end of the spectrum, you have tornadoes, which only appear on low tide. The basket on the shore is covered by a rock, so you and your teammates have to carry the eggs all the way back to the main basket. You do this by tossing the eggs along in like a chain and work together to meet the quota. This one's easy since despite the fact that you have to travel a far distance, every egg is counted by 2, and all the eggs appear together in one spot, so you don't really have to work for them. And the only enemies you have to worry about is chum occasionally falling from the sky, no other bosses or anything. You just pass the eggs along in a daisy chain and you win. Mudmouths and geysers are also both kind of easy. Geysers, you'll have your teammates split up and find a hidden goldie in one of these valves. When you fight them, you let your teammates know so you can all go over and dogpile the poor bastard. I have to say, it's pretty funny to see a bunch of inklings and octolings unleash a barrage of attacks on this dude as he shits out a bunch of his children in a chain. In Mudmouths, these giant weird thing, which I guess are still classified as salmon, it'll appear and spawn chum, and you have to simply throw bombs in its mouth and it'll die in a very gory fashion. It kind of follows a similar philosophy with the geysers, where when you see one, you gotta alert your teammates where it is. The mothership will send a bunch of Chinooks to drop baskets filled with chum off. If you take one of these guys out, they'll drop a golden egg. You and your teammates gotta focus that not too many of them are dropping the basket so you don't get overrun. Occasionally, the mothership will come down and try to steal the eggs, in which you and your teammates must come together to fend it off so it doesn't steal too many. How advanced are these chum? That's something I've always wondered. Like, they have to be intelligent to some degree. They are able to build some of this shit, but looking at many of them, they're very like rough or unorthodox, using everyday items like buckets or pans, or it's all beat up and crudely put together. But then you have the mothership. It's literally just a hovercraft. Did they build that thing, or did they just find it lying around? Even if they did just find it, they would still have to figure out how to get it to work, so clearly they're advanced. This whole mode is really fucked up. We're causing genocide toward clearly intelligent creatures and stealing our children for our own selfish gain. No wonder they're going to be invading Ecopolis in the future. They're probably incredibly pissed off over this whole arrangement. Next, you have grillers. Like glowflies, they'll pick a target and chase them down until they're dead. You have to aim for the tail on the back, in which it will get stunned and you'll have ample time to kill it. It also spawn a lot of small fry and overwhelm you if you don't take care of them, so don't forget about the little guys. Cohawk charge is when you pretty much have cohawks exclusively invade. Some teammates will fire at the cohawks using these cannons that appear, allowing the others to collect eggs from the bosses. Finally, there's fog. It's basically a normal wave, but you can't see shit. Communication is probably the most important here since, well, you can't see. Not only that, but sometimes a Goldie will appear, giving you like a bunch of eggs, or one. But overall, I just really don't like this one. Especially with randoms, where your only means of communicating is this way, and booyah. As you can see, all these special modes really focus on the aspect of teamwork and working together to get the job done. If any of you falter, it'll make these waves much harder. They're also just nice to have to break up the regular waves and give you something else to do. The last thing I really need to talk about with Salmon Run is the emergency wave that occasionally can happen. You see this silhouette in the corner here? That's the King Salmon meter. Every shift you do, the meter will rise, and once it's full, you have a chance to face the fat fuck. It's not 100% guaranteed. It also takes into consideration the meters of your other coworkers. If theirs is also full, then it's guaranteed. It also means if yours is empty, one can still appear since another crewmate might have theirs full. Anyway, this guy has a lot of health, and you have to work as a team to take him down. Have I made that clear? Have I drilled that point into your head yet? This mode is about teamwork. Every aspect is designed to work together as a team. I'm not sure if I'm getting the point across. I hope my viewers understand. You have to take down the bosses and use the eggs to attack the king salmonid. Usually you have one of the teammates that'll get the attention of him and lure him in spots that makes him more vulnerable, or a place with scattered eggs. Your teammates basically need to be attacking this guy at all times, since the timing can be pretty tight. Well, to be honest, you don't really have to beat him, since the awards you get will always be random. You see, when you face a king salmonid, you get scales. The more health you take, the more scales you get. But the kind of scale you get, bronze, silver, or gold, is random. Sometimes you can all die to the king at the start and get 1 golden scale out of it. Sometimes you'll beat him and get 10 bronze. They probably did this so that inexperienced players aren't locked out of getting some of the cooler cosmetics, but it honestly does make the victory feel a little hollow when you go through a whole ordeal to beat this guy and the game hands you just like shit. And in terms of gameplay, that's it. I went pretty much over every aspect I can think of. As you can see, as I'm going to say for the 7,000th time, this mode is about teamwork. Every part of it, from the bosses to the ties, to the special ways, to the Konosuha, it's all about working together and getting the job done. The game leaves open a lot of opportunities to help your teammates, from fighting salmonids, to reviving them, to communicating, and so on. It's a very thrilling mode. You're always on the move, watching everything that's going down. So even if you play a bunch of times, each wave is still going to feel very fresh. I can't really remember the last time I got this into a game where it kept bringing me back every day. It's that enjoyable. This is usually the part of a video where I try to be all like deep and stuff. Well, as deep as an internet review about a children's game can be. It's more like a puddle than anything. Above sea level, but generally I try to look at an aspect of myself or something in general to make a meaningful comment out of it, but I don't really have that here. I just really wanted to talk about Salmon Run. I just love it that much. Looking back, I now realize that this is less of a review and more of a retrospective, since it's more just me expressing how much I love this mode, but oh well. I would love to go over the other modes and aspects of Splatoon. I really enjoy the game as a whole. It was just Salmon Run that I loved the most, which is why I decided to make a whole video about it. If I do come back to Splatoon, it probably will be with like the story mode or something. That's all I really have to say. Thank you all for watching, and have a great day.